Sometimes, there's one person who never fully leaves your mind. No matter how much time passes, no matter how quiet things become. You may go through your day feeling fine, focused on work, responsibilities, or life moving forward. And then, without warning, a thought of them appears. Not forced, not invited, just there. And when it happens, it feels different from ordinary memories. It carries weight, emotion, a strange familiarity that doesn't fade quickly. You might tell yourself it's nothing, that it's just habit, that the mind wanders. But deep down, something about it feels too specific to ignore, too consistent, too emotionally charged, especially when the thoughts come during moments of calm or when you're not even thinking about the past at all. It raises a quiet question many people are afraid to ask. Why does this person still show up in my inner world? Psychology tells us that the mind doesn't hold on to people randomly. Emotional bonds leave imprints. When a connection once mattered deeply, when it involved trust, vulnerability, or emotional safety, the brain stores it differently. Even when communication stops, the emotional memory doesn't simply disappear. It waits. It resurfaces. It reminds you, gently or suddenly, that something meaningful once existed. Many people experience this without ever talking about it. The dreams that feel too real, the sudden emotional waves that arrive out of nowhere, the quiet sense of presence when you're alone, the urge to check your phone without knowing why. These experiences can feel confusing, even unsettling, especially when there's no logical explanation attached to them. And yet, they keep happening. What makes this even harder is that society often tells us to move on quickly, to distract ourselves, to label these feelings as weakness or overthinking. But psychology suggests something different. It suggests that the mind processes emotional connections in its own time. Silence doesn't erase meaning. Distance doesn't automatically dissolve emotional memory. If you're watching this, there's a chance you've felt at least one of these things. Maybe you've wondered whether it's coincidence, imagination, or something deeper happening beneath the surface. This isn't about predicting outcomes or promising reunion. It's about understanding why certain connections linger and why your inner experience feels so specific. In this video, we'll explore 15 signs that psychology associates with ongoing emotional awareness, signs that often appear when someone is still thinking about you, even if you're not talking. These signs aren't dramatic. They are subtle, quiet, and deeply human. As you listen, notice what resonates, not with fear or expectation, but with honesty. Because sometimes, understanding what's happening inside you brings more clarity than answers ever could. 1. Sudden thoughts of them without any reason. Sometimes a person enters your mind without warning. No trigger, no memory, no clear reason. You aren't scrolling through old messages, listening to a song, or thinking about the past. Yet suddenly, they are there. This experience feels different from normal thinking because it interrupts your emotional state rather than following it. Psychology suggests that the mind often processes unresolved emotional connections subconsciously, meaning thoughts can surface when the emotional bond is still active on a deeper level. These sudden thoughts often feel intrusive but gentle, not forced. They may appear during quiet moments, while working, or even when you're emotionally stable. That's because the brain doesn't always follow logic when emotional attachment is involved. Strong connections leave neural patterns behind, and those patterns can activate unexpectedly. Many people notice that these thoughts come with a specific emotion, longing, warmth, sadness, or calm, rather than neutral recall. This emotional charge is important. It suggests that the connection hasn't fully resolved, even if communication has stopped. The mind is signaling that something remains unfinished or unexpressed. What makes these thoughts stand out is their persistence. You may try to distract yourself, yet the thought returns later the same day or over several days. This repetition often creates confusion, making people wonder why they can't move on despite trying. In many cases, it's because emotional bonds don't fade at the same pace as physical distance or silence. The mind holds onto what once felt meaningful, especially when closure was never complete. 2. Feeling their presence when you're alone. Feeling someone's presence while you're physically alone is a subtle but powerful experience. It doesn't mean you imagine seeing them. Rather, it feels like an emotional or energetic awareness, as if they are nearby in some invisible way. This sensation often occurs during quiet moments, late at night, early mornings, or when your mind isn't occupied. Psychologically, this can happen when a person was once a significant emotional anchor in your life. The brain becomes accustomed to their emotional signal, so even in their absence, the nervous system remembers how it felt when they were around. That memory can recreate a sense of presence, especially when the bond was deep or emotionally intense. This feeling is often accompanied by calm, warmth, or a strange sense of familiarity. Sometimes it can also bring discomfort or longing, depending on how the relationship ended. The key detail is that the feeling feels real, not imagined. It doesn't come from active thinking, it arrives quietly. Many people report this sensation during periods of emotional vulnerability or reflection. When defenses are down, subconscious connections surface more easily. Silence amplifies internal awareness, making emotional memories feel closer and more alive. Importantly, this presence doesn't usually last long. It fades once the mind becomes busy again, but its impact lingers, leaving you with the sense that the connection hasn't completely dissolved. It reminds you that emotional bonds are not limited by physical distance. They exist in memory, feeling, and subconscious awareness long after words stop being exchanged. 3. Strong emotional waves out of nowhere. Strong emotional waves that appear suddenly can feel confusing and overwhelming. One moment you're fine, and the next you feel sadness, warmth, longing, or even comfort, without a clear cause. These emotions don't build gradually. They arrive all at once, like a surge. This sudden intensity is what separates emotional waves from normal mood changes. From a psychological perspective, emotions are often triggered subconsciously before the conscious mind catches up. The brain stores emotional experiences differently from logical memories. When a past connection was emotionally significant, those stored emotions can resurface unexpectedly, especially when something internal, not external, activates them. These waves often feel specific, even if you can't explain why. You might feel a sense of missing someone, emotional heaviness, or deep tenderness without knowing what started it. That specificity suggests the emotion is connected to a person rather than a general mood. People often notice these waves during moments of rest, emotional openness, or exhaustion. When the mind is less guarded, suppressed feelings rise more easily. This doesn't mean you're moving backward. It means your emotional system is processing what was never fully released. What makes these waves powerful is their ability to pass on their own. They rise, peak, and fade, often leaving behind clarity or quiet reflection. Though uncomfortable at times, they are a sign that your emotional world is still active and responsive. They show that connections leave lasting imprints, and that the mind continues to process them long after silence replaces conversation. 4. Dreams that feel unusually real. Dreams that feel unusually real are different from ordinary dreams because they carry emotional weight that lingers even after waking. These dreams don't fade quickly. You may remember details clearly: their voice, expressions, the setting, or even the emotions you felt inside the dream. Sometimes, it feels less like a dream and more like an experience you briefly stepped into. Psychologically, vivid dreams often occur when the subconscious mind is processing unresolved emotional material. During sleep, the mind is no longer filtered by logic or control, allowing suppressed feelings and memories to surface freely. When a person has left a deep emotional imprint, the brain may revisit that connection through dreams as a way of processing unfinished emotional business. What makes these dreams stand out is their emotional realism. You might wake up feeling comforted, unsettled, or deeply nostalgic, as if the interaction truly happened. This emotional aftereffect is a sign that the dream touched something real within you, not just imagination. These dreams often appear during periods of emotional transition, stress, or reflection. When your waking life slows down, the subconscious becomes louder. The mind uses familiar emotional figures to communicate feelings that haven't found expression during the day. Even if the dream doesn't make logical sense, the emotions usually do. They reflect longing, connection, or unresolved attachment. Such dreams don't necessarily mean you want to return to the past, but they do suggest that the emotional memory of that person is still active, quietly asking for acknowledgement or closure. 5. Hearing their name repeatedly. Hearing someone's name repeatedly can feel strange, especially when you're not actively thinking about them. You may notice their name in conversations, songs, social media, or even in unrelated places. At first, it feels like coincidence, but repetition makes it stand out and hard to ignore. From a psychological standpoint, the brain is highly selective. When someone holds emotional significance, your awareness becomes more sensitive to information related to them. This is known as selective attention. Your mind notices their name more easily because it carries emotional meaning, not because it suddenly appears more often than usual. What makes this experience impactful is the timing. Often, their name appears during moments when you're emotionally open or reflective. It can trigger sudden thoughts or feelings, pulling that person back into your awareness without warning. This can create confusion, especially if you believed you had moved on. Emotionally charged names act as mental anchors. They connect to memories, feelings, and past experiences stored in the subconscious. When the mind encounters that anchor repeatedly, it reactivates the emotional network tied to it. Over time, this repetition can feel symbolic, as if something unresolved is trying to resurface. Even if logic dismisses it as coincidence, the emotional response is real. Hearing their name repeatedly doesn't force meaning, but it does reveal that your mind still associates strong emotion with that person, enough to make their name impossible to ignore. 6. Random memories surfacing at once. When random memories surface all at once, it often feels like emotional flooding. Moments from different times, conversations, expressions, shared experiences, suddenly appear together without being intentionally recalled. These memories don't come one by one. They arrive in clusters, creating a strong emotional reaction. Psychologically, this happens when the mind connects multiple memories to a single unresolved emotional theme. The brain stores emotional memories in networks rather than isolation. When one part of that network is activated, others follow automatically. This is why memories can feel overwhelming and unexpected. These moments often occur when you're relaxed, tired, or emotionally quiet. Without distractions, the subconscious has more space to surface. The memories may not be significant on their own, but together they create a powerful emotional narrative. What's important is that these memories often focus on emotional details rather than facts. You remember how you felt, not just what happened. That emotional recall suggests the bond was meaningful and hasn't been fully processed or released. These memory waves can feel disruptive, but they are part of emotional integration. The mind revisits stored experiences to make sense of them from a new perspective. Even if the memories bring sadness or longing, they are a sign that your emotional system is still working through connection, loss, or attachment, quietly trying to reach balance and understanding. 7. A deep sense of calm or longing. A deep sense of calm or longing often appears quietly, without any obvious cause. You may suddenly feel peaceful, as if something inside you has softened, or you may feel a gentle ache that isn't painful but persistent. This feeling doesn't rush in like strong emotions. It settles slowly and stays longer than expected. Psychologically, this sensation is linked to emotional attachment stored in the subconscious. When someone once provided comfort, safety, or emotional connection, the brain associates their presence with regulation and calm. Even in their absence, the emotional memory can recreate that feeling internally. Longing, on the other hand, appears when the bond is still meaningful but incomplete or interrupted. This calm or longing often shows up during moments of stillness, when you're resting, driving, or doing something repetitive. Without distractions, the mind reconnects with emotional imprints that were never fully released. The feeling doesn't demand attention, but it asks to be felt. What makes this experience distinct is its neutrality. It's not dramatic sadness or intense happiness. It's softer, quieter, and more reflective. That subtlety often confuses people because it doesn't feel like missing someone in a traditional sense. Instead, it feels like remembering how something once felt emotionally safe or deeply familiar. This calm or longing doesn't necessarily mean you want the past back. It reflects that the emotional bond left a lasting imprint. The mind recalls not the person themselves, but the emotional state they represented, and that memory continues to surface gently over time. 8. Thinking of them at the same time daily. Thinking of someone at the same time each day is a pattern that often goes unnoticed at first. You may realize that your thoughts drift toward them during a specific moment, late at night, early morning, or during a daily routine. This repetition feels automatic, not intentional. From a psychological perspective, the brain builds emotional habits around people who were once integrated into your daily rhythm. If someone was emotionally present during certain times, calls, messages, shared routines, the mind learns to associate those moments with them. Even after separation or silence, the habit remains. This timing-based recall is linked to memory conditioning. The mind remembers not just the person, but when they mattered most. When that time arrives each day, the emotional memory activates on its own, pulling the person back into awareness. These thoughts often feel gentle rather than overwhelming. You might pause, think of them briefly, then move on. Yet the consistency makes it noticeable. It's less about missing them constantly and more about the mind revisiting a familiar emotional checkpoint. What's important is that this pattern continues even when life changes. New routines may form, but the thought still appears at the same time. This suggests the emotional imprint is deeply rooted. The mind hasn't erased the connection. It has simply stored it in a predictable place, revisiting it quietly as part of its internal rhythm. 9. Unexpected mood shifts linked to them. Unexpected mood shifts linked to someone often feel confusing because they don't match your current situation. You may feel fine, then suddenly experience sadness, warmth, irritation, or emotional heaviness without knowing why. Only later do you realize the feeling is connected to thoughts of them. Psychologically, emotions tied to attachment are stored deeply and can activate without conscious thought. The brain processes emotional memories faster than logical reasoning. This means a feeling can appear before you recognize its source. When a person once played a major emotional role, even subtle internal cues can trigger an emotional response linked to them. These mood shifts are often brief but intense. They may come and go quickly, leaving you wondering what caused them. The suddenness is key. It shows the reaction wasn't planned or controlled. It emerged from subconscious processing. Such shifts often occur when the mind is relaxed or emotionally open. Stress, fatigue, or quiet moments lower mental defenses, allowing unresolved feelings to surface. The emotion doesn't always carry a clear message, but it carries weight. These changes don't mean you're unstable or regressing. They indicate that the emotional connection hasn't fully settled. The mind continues to integrate past experiences, adjusting to their absence while still responding to their emotional imprint. Over time, these shifts often lessen as understanding and emotional balance gradually form. 10. Feeling drawn to check your phone. Feeling an unexplained urge to check your phone can happen even when there are no notifications, messages, or alerts. You may unlock your phone repeatedly, glance at the screen, or feel a quiet expectation that something might be there. This pull feels subtle but persistent, and it often doesn't come from conscious thought. Psychologically, this behavior is tied to emotional anticipation. When someone once played an important role in your communication routine, your brain learned to associate emotional connection with your phone. Messages, calls, or shared moments created a reward pattern. Even after communication stops, the emotional habit can remain. This urge often appears suddenly and fades just as quietly. You may not even realize who you're expecting to hear from until after you've checked. That delay is important. It shows the impulse comes from the subconscious, not deliberate thought. The feeling is strongest during moments of stillness or vulnerability. When distractions fade, emotional memory becomes louder. The phone becomes a symbol of connection rather than a device. You're not checking for information, you're checking for emotional reassurance. Over time, repeatedly checking without results can create confusion or frustration. But the behavior itself doesn't mean weakness. It reflects how deeply emotional bonds become wired into daily habits. The mind doesn't immediately let go of patterns linked to closeness, especially when the bond ended without clear emotional closure. 11. Physical sensations without explanation. Physical sensations without explanation can include a tight chest, warmth, heaviness, tingling, or a sudden sense of pressure. These sensations appear without physical cause and often pass quickly, leaving you puzzled about their origin. What makes them noticeable is that they feel emotionally connected rather than medically or physically driven. Psychology recognizes that emotions are not only mental experiences, they are embodied. The nervous system stores emotional memory, and when something unresolved is activated, the body can respond before the mind understands why. This is why physical sensations often appear suddenly and without warning. These sensations may occur alongside thoughts of a specific person or even before you consciously think of them. The body reacts faster than awareness. It processes emotional signals instantly, using sensation as a form of communication. Such experiences often happen during quiet moments, emotional openness, or fatigue. When mental control is lower, the body expresses what the mind has suppressed. The sensation doesn't usually last long, but its impact can linger. These physical reactions don't mean something is wrong. They indicate that emotional memory is still active within the nervous system. The body remembers connection, attachment, and emotional intensity even when words and contact have disappeared. Over time, as emotional processing continues, these sensations often soften and appear less frequently. 12. Intuitive pull toward their energy. An intuitive pull toward someone's energy feels different from ordinary thinking. It's not a clear thought or emotion. It's more like a quiet inner direction, a sense of being drawn toward them without knowing why. This pull doesn't demand action, it simply exists. From a psychological perspective, intuition is the mind's way of processing information that hasn't reached conscious awareness. Emotional bonds create deep familiarity, and the brain becomes attuned to subtle emotional cues connected to that person. Even in their absence, the internal sense of connection can remain. This pull often feels calm rather than urgent. You may feel connected without needing contact or explanation. Sometimes it appears during reflection, meditation, or emotional stillness, when the mind is most receptive to subtle internal signals. What makes this experience unique is its neutrality. It's not desperation or obsession. It's quieter, almost accepting. That calmness suggests the connection was meaningful enough to leave a lasting internal imprint. This intuitive pull doesn't predict outcomes or guarantee reunion. It reflects emotional resonance rather than future events. The mind recognizes familiarity, shared emotional history, and unresolved attachment, and expresses it as a gentle internal draw. Over time, this pull may fade or transform as emotional understanding deepens and balance is restored. 13. Synchronicities that point to them. Synchronicities are meaningful coincidences that feel too specific to ignore. You may notice repeated numbers, familiar symbols, places, songs, or situations that unexpectedly remind you of them. These events don't feel random because they appear during moments when your thoughts are quiet or when you least expect them. From a psychological perspective, synchronicities occur when the mind is emotionally attuned to certain patterns. When someone holds deep emotional significance, your awareness becomes more sensitive to anything associated with them. The brain connects meaning to patterns, and those patterns begin to stand out more clearly. What makes synchronicities powerful is their timing. They often appear during moments of doubt, reflection, or emotional distance. You may not be thinking about the person consciously, yet something external brings them back into your awareness. This creates a sense of connection between your inner emotional state and the outer world. These moments often feel reassuring or unsettling, depending on the emotional history involved. They don't force interpretation, but they invite reflection. The mind tries to understand why the same references keep appearing, why certain reminders feel persistent. Synchronicities don't guarantee action or outcomes. Instead, they highlight unresolved emotional threads. The repetition suggests the connection still holds meaning internally. Whether viewed psychologically or symbolically, these moments show how deeply emotional memory influences perception, guiding attention toward what the mind hasn't fully released or understood yet. 14. Emotional connection despite distance. An emotional connection despite distance feels real even without communication. You may not talk, text, or see each other, yet the emotional awareness remains intact. The bond doesn't weaken with time or space, it simply becomes quieter. Psychologically, strong emotional connections are not dependent on physical presence. When a bond forms through vulnerability, trust, or shared emotional experiences, it becomes stored deeply in the subconscious. Distance removes interaction, but it doesn't immediately erase emotional memory. This type of connection often feels steady rather than intense. You may sense emotional closeness without longing or urgency. There's a quiet understanding that something once meaningful still exists, even if it's unspoken. People often notice this connection during moments of reflection or emotional honesty with themselves. It's not about wanting to reach out. It's about recognizing that the emotional imprint remains unchanged by silence. What's striking is how this connection resists logic. Even when you accept separation or move forward in life, the emotional bond doesn't completely dissolve. It adapts. This doesn't mean the connection must continue externally. It means the emotional experience was significant enough to leave a lasting internal mark that distance alone cannot erase. 15. An unshakable feeling of being remembered. An unshakable feeling of being remembered is a quiet certainty rather than a dramatic belief. You don't have proof or confirmation, yet there's a persistent sense that someone still holds you in their thoughts. This feeling doesn't come with urgency or expectation, it simply exists. Psychologically, this sense can develop when a relationship involves mutual emotional impact. When two people deeply affect each other, the brain retains that significance. Even without contact, the mind understands that such influence doesn't disappear easily. This feeling often appears during moments of emotional calm, not distress. You may feel grounded, reflective, or peaceful when it arises. That calmness suggests the feeling isn't driven by anxiety or wishful thinking, but by emotional memory. What makes this feeling strong is its consistency. It doesn't fluctuate wildly. It remains present across time, even as circumstances change. You may question it, but it doesn't fully go away. This sense of being remembered doesn't guarantee communication or reunion. It reflects emotional permanence rather than future action. The mind recognizes that meaningful connections leave lasting impressions on both sides. Even in silence, those impressions can continue to exist quietly, carried within memory, emotion, and shared experience.